Hi, my name is Joseph Thompson, and as Danielle mentioned, today we are talking about group dynamics principles in relation to our final project. More specifically, we are talking about communication, problem solving, critical thinking, ethical behavior, and conflict management. Conflict management is actually what I will be talking to you about today. To begin, I'd like to pose a simple question for you. How many times have you found yourself in a group where individuals within the team just do not get along? They're fighting over the process, they're fighting over what objective to meet, and in some cases, the only reason they're at each other's throats is they just don't like each other. How to deal with this situation is what I will be discussing. I'll be talking about what conflict is, I'll be talking about whether or not it's a bad thing in and of itself, or whether or not there can be some good that comes out of it, and I'll be giving you some simple conflict management techniques that can help improve group performance no matter what situation you find yourself in. To begin, the first thing I want to do is discuss what our project was and why we believed it was important. After all, we're talking about group dynamics principles in relation to our project, therefore, providing that as a basis is a good place to start. After that, I'll define conflict, and like I said before, I'll describe whether or not it's good and bad. Then I'll move on to describe the mentioned conflict management techniques. Then I'll come back around to my project and describe how these principles applied as we completed our group work. Therefore, I'll give the presentation sort of a sandwich organization. We'll begin with the project, we'll move on to the meat of our topic, and then we'll come back around to our project again. So let's begin. Our group project was an article on WordPress.com that was intended to help college students cope with stress. The reason why we chose this and the reason why we believed it was important was for three specific reasons. The first one was because as college students ourselves, we understand that anxiety and stress are a huge part of campus life. After all, college classes provide a huge amount of homework for you to do. Juggling that along with the job, possibly kids, whatever other life situation you have, can be a huge source of stress and anxiety for individuals. In fact, the American Psychological Association relates that 60% of all college counseling has to do with stress and anxiety management. Therefore, we believed it was important to provide a means to give help to these individuals. Another reason why we chose this topic is because anxiety contributes to depression and suicidality. Therefore, we felt that we could get some help out to some individuals. We might not only make the semester easier, but we might actually save a life in the process. So that was the basis of our group. That's why we created the project. That's why we decided to do what we did. Now, let's get into conflict and talk about how you can manage a conflict situation. Now, according to the book Communication in Groups by Catherine Adams and Gloria Galens, which, by the way, is a fantastic resource, I would recommend it to anyone. It's the book I'm using for this particular class. Wonderful guide to help mediate and build a proper functioning group. According to that textbook, conflict takes place when two individuals have beliefs or goals that are incompatible with each other or that they believe are incompatible with each other. Now, this comes in three basic forms. The first is task conflict. Task conflict is when individuals disagree over what specific goal to make the objective of their group. For instance, let's say a business had a committee and they were trying to decide how to raise profits. And let's say the group was 10 people and 3 of them wanted to increase profits by having more advertising, and the other 7 wanted to just lower prices. That way they sell a greater volume of items. This would be task conflict. This is when individuals in a group simply cannot agree over exactly what objective to center on. The second type of conflict is the most common. This is relational conflict. And this is what I mentioned earlier, when group members just do not get along with each other. The reason why, the reason why this is so common is because when you have a group of people, diversity is going to be a very, very large factor. Individuals are never going to be exactly the same. You're going to have unique personalities, unique beliefs, unique ideas. And when these people come into a team situation, inevitably you're going to have people who just don't get along with each other. And you're going to have arguments, disagreements, whatever case might be, depending on how big the differences between people are. The last type of conflict is process conflict. This goes back to task conflict a little bit, in that it centers on once you've decided your objective, now you're fighting over exactly how to go about it. So let's say the 3 members on our business committee decided to go with advertising. Well, now what do? Do you put it in a newspaper? Do you create a website? Do you get word out by pamphlets? How do you advertise? So now we're arguing about that. That's process conflict. That's when people just cannot agree over how exactly to go about solving a problem or reaching a specific goal. Now, another important question that comes out of conflict is whether or not it's always good or bad. After all, when we think of conflict, we usually think about, images like a couple fighting with each other, yelling, calling names. Conflict is usually given a bad rap. It kind of has a negative association to it. In reality, though, and this is interesting, conflict can actually be a very good thing. According to Ohio State University, conflict can actually add new perspectives, new ideas, and even increase participation and unity between group members. After all, if you're disagreeing about something, you're going to have to communicate and work with each other in order to solve it. So if you're able to do that in an effective manner, it actually can bring members together and help alter and polish each other's ideas to make them broader, make them more applicable to the situation, and just overall make them better. Now, when conflict begins to become bad is when it polarizes members. This is when two members, for lack of a better way to say it, retreat into their own camps and will not work with each other. This creates a split between members within a group and reduces the group to just a group of individuals again. They're not a team anymore. It's, look out for number one. That is a situation in which conflict can actually hurt a group. Polarizes the members, splits them apart, and if left unchecked, it will destroy a group. Another way that it can hurt a group is if it blows up to the point where people are calling names. This can cause hurt feelings, resentments, and again, can have the same result as polarizing. It'll split members apart and destroy a group. So, conflict can be both good or bad, but I think the important thing to note is that conflict in and of itself is not a bad thing. What comes out of it and how it is handled decides whether or not it is bad. If you can handle it in a proper way to help build the group's cooperation and create new ideas, then that was good conflict. If it's destroying members, then it's bad conflict. So it's more the outcome rather than the thing itself that depends whether or not it's good or bad. So what happens what do you do when conflict arises? How do you manage it? Well, according to Wright College, there are 5 different ways that you can deal with conflict in a group setting. The first one, and I'm going to order these from the worst to the best, is forcing. This primarily takes place when you are dealing with a leader who's having a disagreement with his people who follow him. In this situation, the leader is going to step in and say, this is what I want and this is what we're going to do because I say so. The problem with this, while it solves the issue, is that it causes members to feel misrepresented. They don't feel like the leader cares about what they believe, and over time this is going to create resentment, which is going to have the effect of, like I mentioned before, splitting the group apart and causing a polarized attitude. The second conflict management technique is called accommodating, and this is the exact opposite of forcing. This is when one member says, okay, go ahead, I'll back off and let you do what you want. Trouble with this is, one, again, it doesn't polarize, it causes a feeling of misrepresentation, but it also doesn't really lead to any effective conflict management because they're just agreeing to the first solution that pops into their head. It doesn't really allow for any polishing or altering of perspectives. The third type is called avoidance. And the name is exactly what it is. You just pretend like a conflict isn't there, hope it goes away on its own, which I might point out very rarely does. In fact, usually it just festers and gets worse. So that actually is not a good conflict management technique to use. The fourth type, and this is one of the better ones, is compromising. This is when individuals can't find a solution that is compatible for both of them, so they take one that is semi-usable for both individuals. So let's say, for example, 2 individuals are arguing over a fence. One person wants to put a fence in his yard, the other person doesn't want a fence in his yard. Because the one person wants privacy, the other person is worried because now he can't see the rest of the neighborhood because there's a fence there. So in compromise with each other, they decide to build a shorter fence. That way, the view of one neighbor is a little obscured, so he gets his privacy, but the other person can still see over it for the rest of what he wants, to be able to see the rest of the community around. So it's finding a solution that's compatible to both individuals, at least in some aspects. Maybe not completely compatible, but it works for both individuals. The last example is collaboration. And honestly, collaboration is the best. It's actually been described as a win-win situation. And I'm actually going to talk about that in just a second with an example from our group project. But one last thing I want to touch on before I move on is the importance of communication and proper listening. Now, Danielle talked about communication, so I'm not gonna go back over it again because I'm sure no one wants to hear the same points twice. But I'm just going to point out that if you're able to communicate properly with one another, it's going to foster a better respect for group members and allow people to talk in a much calmer and more effective manner. This is actually a very key principle to conflict management. It applies to all 5 of the things I just mentioned. If you can talk respectfully and communicate in a proper manner with each other, maintain respect, you're going to garner a more friendly attitude from all members and make the process of dealing with a conflict far easier. Another important point is to deal with a conflict quickly. Like I said, if you avoid it, it's just going to fester, so make sure to deal with it while it's small. Now, to help develop the idea of conflict management, I'm going to talk about our group project and provide an example of how conflict management applied to our group work. Now, this particular thing was a little hard to find in terms of an example because our group works really well together, so there really wasn't much conflict that came out of our project work. But there was one instance right at the very end that is a perfect example of collaboration that I mentioned earlier. This happened right before the due date, actually, when we were proofreading and tweaking each other's posts. One of our members, Carrie, who will be talking in just a little while, noticed that I was formatting my in-text citations wrong. She believed that when you don't have an author for your in-text citations, you're supposed to use the name of the web page. Not necessarily the website, but the actual web page, the title, as in place of the author. I disagreed. I believed that you should use the website name instead of the author. After all, the website was what published the article. Therefore, it makes a pretty good stand-in. Me and her hit deadlock on this. We weren't really sure what to do. So, to solve the issue, we worked together and we actually went down and tracked down the authors of the individual articles so we could put the authors' names in there. And that way we found a solution that was compatible to both of us. Therefore, it is a wonderful example of collaboration because we were able to find a solution that fits with both of our needs. Collaboration, I actually believe I failed to define it earlier. Apologies for that. Collaboration takes place when group members are able to find a solution that is equally compatible with everyone. And this can actually foster group unity because it makes group members work together and find a solution that is acceptable to everyone. And this is exactly what happened with our team. We worked to find the authors, we figured out that was the best way to do it, and we went about solving it, and we ended up turning out a really good project as a result. So it's a perfect example of proper conflict management. So to conclude, conflict is a natural part of any group setting. Like I said, you're going to have diverse opinions, diverse viewpoints, and as a result, you're going to have people butting heads with each other. There's just no getting around it. When this happens, though, how you handle it can decide whether or not it's going to add perspective and new ideas, or whether or not you're going to destroy the group through hurt feelings and bullying each other. And the way you do this is through the 5 different methods I mentioned: forcing, accommodation, avoiding, compromising, and collaborating. If you use those properly, and if you are determined to succeed, the group will function better as a result, and you will get through any hurdles that are coming your way. To put it in a very simple phrase, if a group is determined and are ready to work together, there is absolutely nothing that they cannot do. No conflict will stop them, no task will be too hard, and they will succeed wonderfully as a result. Now, another important part that comes into group dynamics and that related very much to our project is critical thinking and problem solving. And to that end, I will hand it on to Team Red Wolf's next member, Arisha Plagins. Thank you.